Good evening, everybody. My name is Teresa Carpenter, and welcome to the 23rd episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And it's been a little while since I've had an episode. I had some shoulder surgery, as I'm sure some of you have been tracking on my social media, but so happy to get back into podcasting. As you know, this is a big passion of mine. And today I have another amazing and special, awesome mentor, just phenomenal guest that I can't wait to talk to. I'm going to read you a little bit about her, and then we're just going to get right into the Q&A. If you guys want to participate in the conversation, feel free to post into the comments. And this is going to be a very insightful conversation about a very important issue. My guest is Paula Pedene, and she is a nationally recognized public relations strategist, Veterans Affairs whistleblower, and author. Her book is called A Sacred Duty. It is the true story of how a visually impaired, decorated Navy veteran's life and family started to unravel when she was targeted for retaliation after bringing to light mismanagement and harassment at a Veteran Affairs hospital. Psychologically crippled by the attacks and battling financial ruin, ruthless superiors, a skeptical media, and her two sons' emotional crisis, she fights back, refusing to surrender to a system that is stacked against her. Working with a bulldog congressional investigator, an ornery VA doctor, and a husband who believes in her, she becomes a central figure in exposing a conspiracy that rocked the nation, killed dozens of veterans, provoked nationwide outrage, and ultimately brought down the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. She is also a respected Navy journalist and one of the original anchors of the Navy video news in the mid-'80s. She's a true pioneer and trailblazer. Welcome, Paula.
Hey, Teresa, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I just admire you so much. I met Paula a few years ago at a Public Relations Society of America. They call it International Conference. And she shared the same story. It wasn't a book yet at that time. It was a presentation. And I was so blown away by it and knew that at some point I just wanted to have the opportunity to have the Q&A that we're having today. So thank you so much for making some time to talk with us. So first off, let me get a little bit about your background. You did start your journey into public affairs and public relations by serving in the Navy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I was in, we were called broadcast journalists, and I actually wanted to be a print journalist. But what they did at the time when I was going through DINFOS, I did go through the Defense Information School. They would test us to see if we were voice qualified because we had shipboard information and television entertainment, the SITE system. And so I was voice qualified. They said, you're going to do print and we're going to keep you and you're going to do broadcast journalism. So I ended up doing both. I happened to be really good at the broadcasting side. So when my first duty assignment came up, they gave me a broadcast slot, but it was in the middle of nowhere on Midway Island.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they have a Navy Broadcasting Service detachment there, Detachment 27. And the good news was I could make all kinds of mistakes, and it was a small audience. So after my 1 year, it's a 1 year remote tour on Midway Island, then I got selected to be at the Far East Network in Tokyo, Japan. And that was, the big leagues. So I was really glad I got time to work out all my kinks. And then after working at the Far East Network, I had a recruiter who was talking to me about staying in, and he said, I know they're looking for an anchor for this show. Do you want to apply? And I said, sure. So I applied, got the gig as the female co-anchor for the show, Navy News This Week. And then I re-enlisted. So I wasn't going to re-enlist until I got it. But I got it. Then I went off to Washington, D.C., and I had a phenomenal career there. Did 3 years, worked with the Secretary of the Navy, so many wonderful people, Admiral Watkins at the time, and we had a good leadership team, and we got to travel all around the country and other places, just doing great stories for a 30-minute broadcast show that went to all the ships at sea and to cable stations all across the country. So when I got when my enlistment ended, I stayed there in Washington as a reporter, and I was having a great time working there. Worked at Cox Broadcasting, and then the U.S. Information Agency under the State Department. And then my husband, I had met him right before I got out of the Navy, and we shuffled off to Buffalo, and that's when I ended up doing public affairs. That's where I got my first public affairs job at the VA in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, wow. So I didn't know that you started at the Buffalo Veterans Affairs Center, and then you went over to Phoenix from there?
So from there, I went from Buffalo to Denver. I got a job at the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs. And then from Denver, went to Phoenix. And I was the first full-time public affairs officer at the Phoenix VA. So I got to really establish that whole program there.
Right. And you were there for quite a number of years before all the stuff with the book happened, correct?
Yeah. So it was about 18 years. So we had, at the time, I had a phenomenal boss. We were a top performing hospital, the one who hired me. And he just he was kind of leader that it's unfortunately rare these days, where they're very confident and they let you do your job. And they know that people like me, if you kind of just help me out a little and keep, put me on the right path, that I will do great things for you. We had the #1 program in the entire VA system for public relations. We had the most accolades, the highest awards. It was a thriving program. And we improved the public opinion of the VA by 30% per year, our research showed. So what started off as, when we first did our research, not many people knew about the Phoenix VA when I got there in 1994. So I did my research, created a plan. That took a while. I got my plan in order by 1997 and approved by the leadership team. And from there, we started implementing all our changes. The newsletter, kind of went from having cartoons and comics and puzzles, crosswords puzzles, to a legitimate newsletter that we were giving to the employees. And then we started a patient newsletter. Because at the time, we didn't have all the digital media that you guys have now. So everything for us was print and mail and fax, or that was kind of the way we did things. We had some email capabilities, but not like what we have today. So
wow. So
a long time ago.
what an amazing journey that you've already had. And then to get to the place where some of the things in the book start happening, it really wasn't even that particular leadership either. It started back before that. Can you say?
Yes. So what happened? So my boss retired, and that's when things started to happen. So the great leader left. We had an interim leader that kind of kept things on course. And then we got this other gentleman in there that he wanted to put himself in front of the patients. And unfortunately for him, that did not sit well with the staff. The doctors didn't like him. The nurses were upset with them. He didn't like me because I was, I had built a reputation and as the go-to person. So when you have somebody who's more into themselves, and you have me that's up there in the C-suite too, and they're all coming to me, he didn't like that. So he started taking things away. He took away my budget. He took away my staff. So this is where the trouble started. But when he got in there, he wanted to get a second MRI machine. And he thought that the best way to do that was to kind of delay some of the care that we were getting for the patient so that he could show a false need for a second MRI. And he was harassing the staff. He was just creating a hostile work environment. So that's when my trouble really started. And we blew the whistle on him, myself and Dr. Foote. And then we were able to go to management, and management knew, because they were getting all kinds of complaints, because management does hear when you have a bad leader. It's just they have to decide if they want to act on it. So we gave them information, we disclosed it, and they removed him quietly. It was all done internally, which is what you want, especially in public affairs. You don't want to air your dirty laundry, in public. So he retired. We got the associate director who wouldn't let go of things. He was forced to retire too. And then we had another interim leader for a year. And then we got the director, Sharon Hellman. And I was excited because at that time, the Phoenix VA had a 60-year history in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was the first time in 60 years we had a female director. So I was excited about that.
Yeah, you come into that, you're just excited, happy.
Us women, we want, we want to see, one of us at the top. And especially the VA was very military oriented, so it had a long history of men in charge. So it was just kind of nice. And I worked to build relationships with her, but in my mind there was just something that kept saying, be careful, be careful. But I just kind of put that to the side and went full bore. Here's what we need to do. I got her introduced to the mayor, introduced to the county hospital, introduced to a high profile opinion leaders group that we had set up, got her connected with the governor's staff, all those kinds of things. And I just think that because I was a whistleblower on the prior administration, just never sat well with them. So I worked my butt off, Teresa, for 10 months, doing everything I could to rebuild my program, to please her, to please the associate director. And then in August, I heard from some friends that they were looking to get me. So that's when I kind of knew I had to really be careful, because when people in high places tell you that, there's not much that can be done to protect you, really.
No.
So that's, so it was from August, I started saving information, and you have to be careful in the
That's what I was going to first ask too, is when you first noticed that this was going to be something that you might be your livelihood and your job might be at stake, you started what I think a lot of people don't think to do. And you started, we see in the camera, documentation.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And how did you go about that? You would just put dates and times and just sort of write out like a story of what happened that day and the interaction?
Yeah. So in the VA, we have something called a report of contact, and it's an official form, and you have to sign it, and you have to sign it truthfully. So I was emailing report of contacts that I had written up, sharing some of the issues that were going on. I was printing documents that I could print. None of it was patient information that I could print, and I would take them home just in case they rifled through things. I would have my own personal copies. Up until that point in time, I only had a government cell phone. I went out, I purchased my own cell phone, signed up for my own account, got my own, email. Believe it or not, everything I did was government related. So that kind of changed. And then I started taking pictures and sending it to it was on my phone. So then I could take a picture of a computer screen and send it to myself. But everything I did not have any patient information, because that is a violation of HIPAA and the Privacy Act. It was all public information, emails from them, things they were doing. They would try to set me up for failure is what they were trying to do.
They were. And the first thing, like your first sign that this was going to happen was, I believe, with the incident with your husband coming in and helping you, right? And that was sort of and a lot of times when we're in a toxic work environment, what we'll find is, and you say it in the book, the death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
There's just these little things that they started to do to kind of eat away at your credibility.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah. So, because of my prior whistleblower experience, they were supposed to rectify the situation that I was in, because the former director, as I mentioned, had cut my budget, he cut my staff. So I was working 80-hour weeks and still not getting everything done, so they were supposed to rectify that by giving me staff back and giving me a budget so I could at least hire some contract support. Never happened. It was always they dragged their feet. We'd have a meeting. We'd meet with a ton of people, and oh, well, we can't do this. Oh, well, we can't do that. After the meeting where we all agree to everything, oh, Paula, we can't do that. HR says blah blah blah. So that went on for 9 months, and so it kind of led me to this point where I was going home and I was, frazzled. And my husband is a registered volunteer at the VA. And I was telling him, I just don't think I'm going to meet this deadline. I've got the parade awards banquet to do. We just had a beautiful, successful parade. The leadership loved it, or said they did. And then I said, I've got to write the director's speech. I've got to print up the certificates and get the ribbons together for the second and third place winners. I have to get the awards in order, and I have a PowerPoint that I need to put together. So before this show, which is taking place the next evening, and he goes, well, I can help you work on the PowerPoint. And I said, would you really? He said, yeah. So I log him onto the computer. It's a government computer. I put the disk in the drive with the pictures. I had created the PowerPoint just as a shell. And I said, okay, find the photos that match and put them in this PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint is on the desktop. The disk is in the drive. He has no access to anything else, okay? And he got all the pictures in the PowerPoint. I worked on the script. I got the certificate. Everything was set. So we were ready, right? We have a beautiful parade awards banquet. The leadership is coming up to me and saying, you did such a nice job, blah, 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 blah. And then on Monday, so this was Thursday, Friday. On Monday, Lance calls me into his office and he says,
and Lance, he's also works with Sharon. So Sharon was the higher
Sharon
boss.
And then was a director. Lance was the associate director.
Yep.
And they were like, little known to me, the two of them were really looking for ways to get me. So I had an inkling, but I just didn't know how bad. So he goes, Paula, I understand from our assistant director that you logged your husband onto the computer in the lobby. And he goes, did you do that? And I said, yes, I did. And he goes, well, that's not appropriate. And I said, Lance, other people have done it. It's common practice in the VA. Right. I said, and I needed help because I haven't been able to get the restitution from the other disclosures. You know this. He goes, well, we'll have to see what is going to happen. I said, okay. And he dismissed me. So I left. And that's when a few days later, I guess it took him a while to get the paperwork together for HR. He calls me into a special meeting in his office and he says, and I go into the office and the HR director is there. So I know that something's not right and I'm in trouble. So I go into the office and he says, we're here today to discuss actions that we're going to take against you. And I looked at him and I'm like, wow. Okay. Yeah. And he asked me again, did you log your husband onto the computer? And I said, yes, I did. And then he asked me something else and I forget because it was such a blur by that point in time. Right.
You're just so frazzled.
Yeah, I forget what else he asked me. And he asked me something else and, whatever. And then he said, I am here to inform you that I am taking you out of your job and I am removing you from your position so we can conduct a 30-day investigation into allegations of misconduct that have been levied against you. And I
Wow.
just didn't know what to do.
Right.
It
It's like
was
the bottom just comes out of you when someone does
exactly. They
something
just
like that.
pull the rug out and
Right.
your job at that point in time is to see if you can stand if they pull everything away from you. And then they just treated me like a criminal. They took away my BlackBerry, they took away my key, they told me to gather up my personal items from my office, and they had the HR director escort me off the property like I was a criminal. And he told me the very next day that I would need to report to education because I was being assigned to education, which was over the library department, and they would find work for me. So I'm out in front of the hospital at the flagpole. I call my employee representative because I had been in touch with him due to the prior whistleblower experience, and I kind of told him some of what was happening. And he goes, I need a copy of that letter. And he didn't have a fax, he didn't have email. So I had to, FedEx it to him overnight. So that was it. And then the next day, I asked for a sick day, which they granted me because I said, I am just emotionally distressed here. I don't know what to do. So, and I had tons of sick leave, tons of annual leave. I think at the time I had the maximum amount of annual leave that you could save. And, the sick leave, I must have had like 20 weeks or something. So using one day, out of a 15-year whatever career didn't seem like the wrong thing to do.
Right. Oh
so
my
there
God,
we started.
Paula.
And
Wow.
that's where it started.
That's kind of the starting point of where the book begins and the journey begins about what are you going to do in a case like this.
Yeah.
And so many people find themselves in this type of a situation where somebody is acting abusively towards you and you don't know what your rights are, what you can and cannot do. And so at that point, after you kind of you've composed yourself and said, okay, I'm gonna fight this, because you had to fight this, right?
I did.
You had too much on the line.
Yeah. At first we thought 30 days, he's like, Paula, my representative is like, go enjoy your vacation,
Right.
Because take time, you've got time, take some time off, come January, this will be over. So he says that, before he gets a letter. And then when he gets a letter, he writes a scathing letter to them saying, Miss Pedene, it was all about putting them on notice that I was a whistleblower and that anything they did to me of a serious nature would be looked at as a possible retaliation effort. He told him that from day one. Told him that from day one. So, and then, as things progressed, the 30 days came and went. Nothing happened. And then we got another letter. And that's when he told me, he said, Paula, they're coming after you criminally. You need to hire a criminal attorney. I can only do EEO and HR. And they're coming after you criminally. So that's when I lost it again.
Oh God, because that's when you're going to have to bring in all these other people. You're going to have to pay out of pocket for attorney fees. And it must have thought to yourself, like, is this even going to be worth it? If I go through all this trouble and hire all these people and get all this help, but you you had this confidence, I think, this unshakable confidence in yourself, right?
Yeah, it's not that rosy. I wish it was that rosy because, like anybody, I think anybody in this situation is like, well, they obviously don't want to work with me. The writing is clear. I didn't realize how much they didn't want to work with me. And, so maybe I better start looking for another job. So I called I was given the name of a financial planner that helps you prepare for retirement within the federal government. And she's phenomenal. Her name is Ann Vanderslice. And if anybody needs help, I mean, I'm telling you, it's best, even to this day, if you have 5 years in, just prepare. It's great to know what to do because she just helped me so much. And then, so I got in touch with her. I started applying for jobs. And of course, I got interviews because I had good qualifications. But by this time, the questions were kind of circling around the medical center that I was out of my job. So when people would call over for a reference, they would say, oh yeah, she's out of her job. And it caused kind of this cloud around me. And it was at that point in time that Roger had another hard conversation with me, and he said, Paula, he goes, I know you are miserable. He goes, and the government, these leaders, they have the right to make you miserable. He goes, as an employee, you have certain rights, but you have to listen to what they say. They're your senior officers, you're a subordinate. So you need to keep your nose clean and just play this game. And he goes, I'm going to tell you this right now. He goes, if you quit, they will go after 1,000 more people because you made it easy. He goes, but if you take a stand and you fight them, he said, it will be a lot harder for them to come after the next person. And he goes, I think you have a great case and I think you're going to win. I don't know how long it's going to take. And that's
Wow.
kind of where we were.
So you just knew, oh gosh, I'm in for the ride, and
Yeah.
you were going to take it on. Did you Now let's get into some of the illegal actions as well, because I think also an issue that people have to decide if they're going to become a whistleblower and take something on like this is, do they have a case, and is somebody doing something illegal?
Right.
If Lance, can you tell us a little bit about what was going on the legal side on their end?
So, first of all, we kind of need to give the context. So the VA has a staff of lawyers, staff. So they have a staff of lawyers at the hospital. They have a regional group that they can then turn to, and they have a national group that they can turn to, right? So they're using the local people, they're using the regional people, they're calling in the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General, that's in there in Phoenix, and they're investigating me. They've got the national people notified, and they're investigating me. And then the fiscal officer, Lance, walks over to the fiscal officer and says, find something on Paula, and quickly. So she, being a little, a supporter of the leadership, and goes back in my fund control 10 years to look at any inappropriate use of funds. And of course, what does she find? Oh, we did a random audit of Paula's fund control point, and we found some issues that are concerning. I think we need to investigate further. And that's where the OIG came back again and looked at the funds mismanagement charge, because had they gotten me on funds mismanagement, that's a felony offense.
Sure.
But of course, everything that I had done had been vetted, signed off, approved by the former fiscal officers, the former contracting officers, the former logistics officers, the former associate director, and the former director. So it was like, really? What are you doing? So, it was that kind of harassment that was going on. And about this time, I was in a van pool, and one of the pharmacists was saying, they kind of saw that Sharon Hellman was not a good leader early on. Some people did. I was a little Pollyanna girl. I'm trying to make her good. I'm the PR person. I want her to be good. And they didn't like some of the things she said at her first town hall, which were things like, if you don't like it here, the number 9 bus comes right outside the medical center. You're free to take the bus and go home, and we'll find somebody else to replace you. And if it was a couple of things like that that really put some of them on edge, and then some other things that had happened. So, anyways, they stopped the Saturday clinics, which is where we were getting the extra patients in, because Phoenix is a hub for veteran growth. It's just a hub for it. And we needed to do Saturday clinics to get the patients in to make sure they were getting the care they need. So they canceled that. She was harassing me at this point in time, and she was harassing other staff, and they just didn't like it. So we got together, we wrote an anonymous letter, and we sent it into the office of the inspector general.
Best part of the books, actually.
Yeah. And it was like cloak and dagger, you guys have to read it. You have to read it to tell you how I operated under that. But that went out. So all of a sudden the OIG comes in and they do an investigation. The office of the medical inspector comes in and they do an investigation, and the Joint Commission comes in and they do an investigation, because we had sent it not only to the OIG, but to those entities, as well as the investigative reporter at the Arizona Republic, Dennis Wagner. So, people are kind of starting to wonder what's happening in Phoenix. And I don't know if it was about that time or prior to, where Dennis Wagner, somebody had told him that they had taken me out of my job and I was under investigation. And of course, after working with me for, at the time, 18 years, and knowing that I was a straight shooter,
right,
his antenna went up. So he calls over and he asks them, is she removed from her position? And what are you guys doing? He finds out who my lawyer is, and he talks to my lawyer. And my lawyer calls me at work, and I'm in the library, because I was reassigned to the library to check in books, check out books, to make copies, sharpen pencils, give people access to the phone. So I go from being the media person, the congressional liaison, dealing with the patients, dealing with the staff, to here we are, checking in books, checking out books. Yeah. So my attorney says, Paula, by this point in time, it's 90 days into the 30-day investigation. Yeah, the 30-day investigation. And he goes, I'm so mad at what they're doing. I gave him the story. He goes, if he calls you, you are not to talk to him.
Because you were under a gag order. You were not allowed to talk about anything. And that is also what I think hinders people when they're in this situation, is that a lot of times they're not able to even talk about what's going on. So there could be this whole other side of the story, but no one's going to know.
Right. Because you know what? You're fighting it legally, and you can't counter what they're saying in the press. Your lawyer can, but you can't. But the lawyer doesn't want to give too much away, because whatever you say can and will be used against you.
Yes.
So you're in a bad spot all the way around. The staff, the rumor mill is flying.
Right.
You've got an investigative reporter calling the offices. The story hits on the front page of the paper. And that was the first time that I felt like I just cried. I cried half the day, because it was like I finally got my voice back after 90 days of telling people, I am not at liberty to say. I am not at liberty to say. I am not at liberty to say, because people ask you, they want to know.
And you're watching people take sides, and people wondering, what do we do? We don't want to lose our jobs. So do we line up with what the leadership, how they're seeing the situation, or do we still have our allegiance to our colleague? That's got to be such a divisive environment to be living in too.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Teresa, you find out who your true friends are. You find out who your true friends are. And that was the hardest thing for me, because people who I thought were my friends and my colleagues just disappeared. It was like I wasn't, you know, I would walk by and say hi and they wouldn't even say hi to me, you know.
And some people just can't stand the weight of what you were doing and didn't probably understand all of the particulars. And we haven't even gone into the waitlist issue
Right.
either, which was a huge part of what was going on there as well. And I do want to preface all of this by saying that we're having this conversation because I think that toxic leadership is such an important subject, but by no means is this reflective of the Department of Veterans Affairs as a whole or any other organization. This just happens to be one instance at one organization where one person was able to fight back. And I think that's so important because a lot of times people don't know how to fight back and they don't understand that they do have a voice. And it is incredibly hard what you did, Paula. And there's very few examples of whistleblowers that are able and will speak publicly about their cases. So I think it's really important that you give that voice to this issue because there isn't very many people out there in the public eye who have talked about how to walk through this. And so when you were first going through these initial stages of when your friends were sort of not your friends anymore and it's 90 days into the investigation, how did the waitlist part come into all this?
So in the library, all I did was work with patients all day long. And I kept hearing them complain about waits and delays. In the van pool, we had, the pharmacist, we had a nurse practitioner, we had another nurse, a mental health nurse, and they were all hearing. And the colleague that drove the van was the one that was in charge of the wait list, the off the books wait list. And she took it on thinking that she could, she's so good at her job as a health administration, person, that she thought she could just get those calls done, get those people set. And she didn't know that she was being set up for failure.
Right.
And when she figured that out, that's when we kind of started working and sending more letters in anonymously. Everything I did, I had to be anonymous because they had put me under an illegal gag order. But my representative said, Paula, they're your superiors. If the one thing they can fire you on easily at this point in time is insubordination. You cannot be insubordinate. You cannot.
Right. And just as a refresher for people that don't know about the Phoenix waitlist scandal, from my understanding from the book, it was basically set up so that they could process people through the VA faster onto their computer system. And so what they were doing is they weren't putting in when the people would initially call to try to set up the appointment. They would stack that up in a paper copy. And then the time that they would call to schedule the appointment was when it would go back into the computer. So it would look like the patient didn't wait because there were benefits and bonuses that were attributed to the leadership if they could get their wait list times down. That's my simple way of understanding
that. And that's I want you to write that down because I'm going to use that.
Because when I read it in the book, it was pretty confusing and elaborate how they were able to orchestrate this. But that's sort of what the ultimate was, is that they were fabricating the amount of time that patients were waiting for care. And there were even people who were dying because they didn't get seen fast enough. And to be able to see something like that, and I know that your Dr. Foote, he was very instrumental in working with you on this issue. So not only were you fighting for your job, you were fighting for patients to be seen.
Yeah. And, Teresa, when Dr. Foote came on board, because, I kept calling him on his personal phone at night, and he's like, "No, Paula, they're treating you pretty badly. I just don't want to, get involved right now."
And was he still with the VA, or he had retired by that point?
No, so what happened was after about a year, he's like, okay, let me do my own research. And he, as a clinic director, he could ask the patient, so how long did you have to wait to get this appointment today?
Mhm.
And they would say, oh, Sam, it was 6 months, it was 9 months, and some of them it was a year. And that's when he had it. He documented those for a couple of months. I think it was August, September, October, and he was writing letters to the OIG, and the OIG was doing nothing. And I think it was in November, he just said, Paula, I'm going to have to retire and blow this whole thing wide open.
Do you think
And
he
I,
would have stuck around if this hadn't happened? Do you think that's why he retired?
yeah, it was why he retired, because he loves serving our veterans.
Mhm.
You know, I have to tell you, the hardest part of all of this is the years of dedication that I gave to the VA, the hundreds of thousands of ethical VA employees that are out there to this
Right.
day taking care of our
Absolutely.
nation's veterans. You know, they deserve a pat on the back. And unfortunately, we have this drama that has tainted that stellar reputation for VA, and it hasn't gone away. It just hasn't gone away because they still need to do things differently. But when Sam finally got on board and he said, Paul, I'm going to retire, I said, Sam, I will help you. And I got him a media trainer because I knew he would have to get with the media. I got him in touch with Dennis Wagner. We set up an editorial board at the Arizona Republic. He went, I couldn't go. I got him in touch with the House Veterans Affairs subcommittee, because remember, I'm the congressional liaison. I'm the media liaison for years and years and years. I know these people. Now, I'm not using them at this point in time, other than, you know, a few for my case, because, you know, we had to slog through the legal system defense of it. But so that's how it all worked. And, you know, the Arizona Republic was ready with a story. CNN was ready with a story, but they couldn't run it because they only had one side, which was our side, Sam's and mine's and Pauline's. And then Congressman Miller, I think, understood that. And one day in a House Veterans Affairs Committee hearing, he just said,
Yep.
and Mr. Secretary, if I would have told you that nearly 40 patients may have died while waiting for care in Phoenix, would you say that was any part of your look back? And he told the Mr. Chairman, I would not. And that's when the cameras started
Right.
going. Arizona Republic's working on their story, CNN's working on their story, because now they can file it, you know. And that's when it all blew, Pandora's box opened.
And that's why your book is so dynamic, because it goes into all of that. And it not only touches upon this drama that's playing out, you go into the mental health side of this
Yeah.
too, and what this was doing to you, what this was doing to your family, and how you guys were coping as a family with,
Yeah.
with having to deal with this with your sons. And you took a lot of sacrifices to bring this to light.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, what was it that was your source of strength through all of this, and how did you get through that?
So really, it was my faith. I mean, the one thing that I have a stronger faith now than I had going through it. And the reason I say that is because at the very end, I was able to look back at everything and say, oh, God had me where he needed me to be. Had I not been banished to the basement library, I wouldn't have heard of all those stories. I wouldn't have been able to do everything I did to help Dr. Foote. You know, I wouldn't have been able to help Pauline as much, all these things. And it really wasn't until the very end that I saw that God had me where he needed me to be. So my faith did keep me strong during the battle, because I do have faith. And then, you know, the circle of friends that you have and your legal team, I'm telling you, you just need, you know, when something like this happens, you need to have a legal team, and they're there. And of course, your good friends. And, you know, Teresa, some people will just come up to me in the middle of the hallway and say, Paula, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. I don't like what they're doing to you, and I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And I would cry, because I was so depressed. you go from being the face of the VA to being and working all those years. I had given my time in the Navy. I had refined my trade. I had taken classes through PRSA. I had, built a strategic plan that was to die for at the Phoenix VA. That was just an award-winning program numerous times, over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, it's just all gone, all gone, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
And most people will never be tested, I think, in a workplace environment in the way that you were. And I applaud your bravery. I don't want to give away the end because I want people to read the book, A Sacred Duty. It's just an amazing story of courage, of triumph. And I want to know, you get through all of this. It's many, many years later now. What inspired you to write the book?
So you know what? It was so funny because one of the other things I did to help protect my reputation, because they're making me look bad, and then I'm in the press now, was I stepped up my leadership roles in PRSA. I had been a leader in PRSA.
Public Relations Society of America, yes.
Yeah. I had been a leader. I had, I'd done like, oh my gosh, I think as long as you could do. I'd served 9 years on the Health Academy. I was the section council co-chair. I was, I was the Phoenix PRSA president. I had served on the board. So I did like 15 years of all that. And then I just thought, okay, I'm going to take a break. And then this happened. So that's when I'm like, okay, got to get back in. And my friend, Susan DeQuayo, appointed me as a Western District liaison. And I believe that was in 2013. So, and then in 2014, I asked to be on the board, and I got elected to the board. And then in 2015, at the end of 2014, I got my settlement. So I was able to really come forward. And I was telling people, look, I love doing presentations. I can do it on strategic planning. I can do it on, media relations. I can do it on research. And what do they want to hear about? Oh no, we want to hear about their whistleblower experience.
Because it's so unique. So few people have done what you've done.
Right. So I went all across the country. I mean, people heard the presentation, they loved it. I'm happy to give it to anyone, out there that's interested. I talk about ethics, I talk about values, and I talk about how you have to treat people and take a stand for ethics. And I use this as a backdrop. That's what I do. But the nuggets in the class are really about what are good morals, what are good ethics, and how do you take a stand? That's really kind of the nuggets of the class.
What advice would you give to other people who are dealing with a toxic work environment, but may not be as comfortable coming forward because maybe their leaders aren't doing anything illegal,
Right.
or there's nothing that, in your case, it was so dynamic. There were so many things, there were so many factors going on, but a lot of times I think people feel targeted in a workplace and there really isn't anything that's going on illegally. It's just bullying or something along those lines. What advice would you have for those people?
So I think that everybody kind of needs to realize there really is a dearth of leadership out there. There are not good leaders. People who are good at their job don't necessarily make good leaders, but yet if they follow the path to leadership, they can become one. So I really think we need to do more training with CEOs in the making and make sure that they understand the ethics, the morals, letting people, giving them free rein. And a lot of that has to do with their level of confidence. And unfortunately, sometimes leaders who lack confidence want to be in the limelight because they think that's going to make them better, but it doesn't. So it's really about getting us in there to help hone the CEOs in training that I think can make a difference. And that's something I'd like to work on. But for the people that are under poor leaders, the only advice I can give you is to buckle up and see what lessons you can learn from them. Can you learn how not to do some of the things they're doing? Is there another way that maybe you can approach this? How stuck are you really? If you're really not stuck, can you look for another path to,
Another position within the company, even.
yeah, to move around, because it's not going to get any better, especially if they're at the top. If they're at the mid-level, there's other mid-level managers that do a good job, and you can maybe go over there and work for them. And sometimes you really just need to leave the company. I tell people, make sure you have 6 months to a year's worth of salary saved up. That was one thing that we didn't have, and it hurt us. Fortunately for me, they could not remove my pay, so I was getting paid the same amount of money for doing the six-figure job upstairs down in the basement library. But the legal fees added up, and fortunately we had, assets that we could borrow against, and we did. I will also tell you to get counseling. Sometimes a counselor can just help you see things differently than what you're looking at them like. I'm very passionate. So sometimes I need to rein that in. And that was one thing that
I
I
can
think I
relate.
need to do better. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes you just can't be so passionate about
No, I
things.
agree.
You kind of need to say, okay, look, I'm going to work and I'm doing the best job I can every day, but it's going to be from 8 to 4:30. And
Mhm.
then it's going to be, like, okay, time for me, time for
Right.
my family. My family really suffered when they didn't restore me, because I was working, like I said, 80-hour weeks. And that's not fair. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to your family. It, hurt my children. It didn't make things great with my relationship with my husband. So, all of this kind of cleared the plate to say, look at what you did do, and how can you make it better moving forward. So now I have much more balance in my life. I make sure that I carve out time for me. Some of my bosses, support. Like I asked to go to the Visual Impairment Services Center because I'm legally blind, and I had cane training, but I had the bare minimum, and that was a 6-week course, and the VA approved it because it was a disability accommodation, and I learned so much that I never knew, that has helped me to this day in my life. So you just kind of, I guess the biggest way to bring it all back to the question, Teresa, is to say, maybe God's telling you something. Maybe you need to look and see what else is out there for you. You
Absolutely.
know, so
Absolutely. We did have a couple comments. I'm sorry I didn't get to them. A couple of them I can't see who the people are if they're not my friend on LinkedIn, but we got a hey, hey, and we got a glad to join. And then we got my buddy Brian said hello. And then this was just from my cousin Brian Johnson, killing it, cuz so proud of you. But so thanks, guys. Before we close out this amazing conversation, is there anything else that you wanted to add about the book or about your journey that I didn't ask you about?
yeah, so I think with the book, people think, and I thought this too, that once you get a book published, it's just out there. It's out at Barnes and Noble, it's out at Target. No, 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 no. It doesn't get out there like you see it on the shelves until it becomes, high up on the seller list. So you have to be kind of patient with the book. You can order it on Amazon. They get it to you in just a couple of days. Same at Barnes and Noble, same at Target. It's available for order everywhere. I have seen people selling it on eBay. I mean, people are running ads on it. It's for sale. If you're here in the Phoenix area, I have some copies that I was able to get from my publisher. So if you contact me, I can get it to you. But it's a really, and I'm not saying this because I wrote it. I wrote it under duress. I had somebody help me clean it up and make it the beautiful book that it is today. It is, I've had so many people tell me who have read it already, it's really a great read. And even when I read it again, editing it, because I've had to edit it at least a dozen times. I'm like, well, I kind of want to get back to it. Even though I'm going through and making fine line edits, it's like, ooh, I want to get back to that.
The chapters are amazing, Paula. Like they just they keep you on the edge of your seat. It's very, very good with the structure and the layout of the chapters, because each time you're like, oh my God, did that just happen? And you close everything on kind of a cliffhanger. And I like that. And so it's like, oh God, I got to read the next chapter and find out what the heck happened with that. Did that really happen? That was so crazy. Oh my God, this is even crazier.
All those years of reading Nancy Drew as a child paid off with this book.
Yeah. Well, it's a great book.
Yeah, it really is. And and once you read it, if you could just write a review, because that helps. It's a great story of government corruption. I just wish I didn't have to go through it to write it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think that the more we share our stories, the more we're providing service. And that's what my podcast is all about, is stories of service. And we all show up for service in different ways. And this was your contribution to be of service, because what you did is you gave a voice and a story to toxic work environments. And there aren't that many out there. If you want to read a book about a whistleblower's experience, I'm not aware. There might be other stories out there, but they're very far and few between. In fact, there's even a whistleblower organization that I believe just recently started to come online and be established. So that just tells you that there just isn't a lot of resources for whistleblowers. Are there, Paula?
Well, there's some, but they're really, it's all legislative. It's all changing things through legislation. So there are a few, the Government Accountability Project, the National Whistleblower Center, and they have conferences and conventions. But the problem is that when you become a whistleblower, the legal fees stack up. So it makes it really hard to kind of, so some of those organizations they're helpful from a support and therapy, and here's some guidance. And that was really helpful to us too. Yeah.
Good.
The other thing I'd like to leave you with, number one, if, when you're going through a challenging time, it's really helpful to get mental health counseling. I got mental health counseling. It was wonderful. It really helped me, helped my family, helped my children. And I talk about that in the book. It's really important. And number two, the other thing I'd like to let you know is that sometimes you never know when you're blazing a trail. I knew in the Navy I was blazing a trail with some of the work I was fortunately able to do. But with this, I will tell you that after my case, that VA became the leading agency for whistleblower disclosures and still remains the number one agency for disclosures to this day. So because of what we did, people do feel like, they can come forward. And wow. I think that's important. I think that's important
too. Well, thank you, Paula. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I'll meet you very fast backstage. I'll just close out a little bit, but gosh, such an honor to talk to you. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Anytime.
And that's all I have for you guys tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Do have another podcast in a couple weeks. I'm going to be having my friend Sandy Duchak. She is the vice president of Veterans Sisters. It is a nonprofit organization that works with survivors who've been through a military sexual assault. So another serious and deep issue. We've got two deep issues in a row, but I think they're really important issues, and she's doing some amazing work in that space. So with that, I'll sign off for tonight, and thank you guys for watching. Have a great evening. Bye-bye now.